awaken Reformation.
Welcome back to Awakening Reformation, where Reformation awakens now. My name is Grant, and joined with me is my beautiful wife, Erica, the weaker vessel.
Hello, everyone.
If you want to get to know more about us, go check out our network, the Reformed Rebel Network. You can still find us at our old website, rebelalliancemedia.com. But you can find Reformed Rebel Network on social media and in iTunes and probably whatever podcast catcher you use. You can also find our episodes on YouTube. So if you go there, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications, and you can follow our content on there. And if you would like to financially support us, you can go to patreon.com/reformedrebel, and we would be very appreciative if you supported us on Patreon.
Indeed.
And there's some goodies you get if you sign up on Patreon too. I couldn't tell you all the details there, but definitely if you sign up, you get some free stuff.
We're the low-hanging fruit of the Reformed Rebel Network, so if you at all enjoy us, it can only get better from here.
Amen. Amen. So
actually, the last episode that Nate and Chris put out on the Rebel podcast, I forgot their name for a second. Sorry, guys. There have been a lot of name changes around here lately.
I know, right?
Okay, so
fair enough.
Anyway, their latest episode was about antinomianism,
and legalism,
and it was really good.
Yeah, their No Other Gospel series has been pretty awesome.
Poots has been kind of on fire.
Right? He's all fired up about the gospel right now. I'm loving it.
I mean, Poots is usually good and entertaining, but like he's been really on it lately.
Dropping some bombs, right?
Right.
Super
Maybe he's
good.
making a list of thoughts.
What do you mean?
I'm just always made fun of for having lists, so...
Oh, yeah.
Probably not. He's probably just smart enough to be on fire without having a list.
Pooty's the man. I love listening to those guys. So go check them out. And the
prepared table?
Yep. The next big thing that we have to...
Both of us looked at each other and thought the same thought at the same time.
Are we going to say it? Are you going to say that next? The prepared table. So
it's like we're married.
I know, right? It's almost like we're one, I guess. If hopefully you listened to our last episode where we had Sandra Rowlett on the podcast and we talked about this big project that we have coming out, the prepared table. And this is going to be our antithesis to Lent. It's going to run every day during the season of Lent.
It is a family worship and feasting guide.
Yes. So if you missed that episode, go listen to it so that way you can get more details. We're kind of giving you a little recap right now. But every single day for 40 days during Lent, we're going to give you the opposite of fasting. We're going to give you feasting.
We're going to give you family devotionals. We're going to give you recipes. We're going to give you all kinds of awesome resources for free on our blog, released to you every day.
And we got the bases covered. So grocery lists are going to come out.
I mean, we're not buying your groceries, but literally everything else. Everything besides the groceries being purchased and the meal being prepared has been done for you.
Everything short of being a welfare state. Buying your groceries.
We ain't about that life.
And Erica and Sandra have done a phenomenal job developing this thing, and I helped a little bit. And but they have really spearheaded this thing and just took off with it running, and the finished product is awesome. So we're really excited to get that thing going. And
that starts on the 26th, but we will release the grocery list and
the intro,
a little teaser
the
Friday before, whatever that day is.
BOLO. That means be on the lookout, right?
Yes.
It's like cops and stuff.
Right. We're going to talk about a little bit of true crime tonight.
That's why I said it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's a good segue. Is there any more business we have to take care of before we get into all that?
Well, we're going to be moving at the end of this year.
Yeah, that's our big announcement.
Late summer.
You guys, so for those of you who followed us for a little while, you know Grant's in the Army, moving, PCSing, as they like to call it in the Army.
It's an acronym. The Army loves acronyms.
Everything's an acronym.
PCS means move.
Yeah. I don't even know what PCS stands for.
Permanent change of station.
Permanent change of station. There you go. I don't even know. I just know what the acronyms mean. I don't know what they stand for.
You don't need to know. Just we're PCSing. That
Right.
means we're moving. That's all you need to know.
That's right. MOS, PCS.
Right.
What other good fun acronyms? NCOIC. That's what you are.
NCOER.
NCOER.
ERB.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lots of acronyms. Anyway, so we're moving, but this time we are not moving because the Army has decided to move us.
No, because I will be out of the Army.
Yeah, Grant has been offered a wonderful job up in Canada.
I have been given the amazing opportunity to work alongside P. Nate of the Rebel Podcast at Crossroads Alliance Church.
Yeah.
So I get to be the
You get to be his
associate
wingman.
pastor. I know, right? What is it in Star Wars? Who's the main guy and who's a wingman? I don't even know Star Wars well enough. I know they would.
Are you the Han Solo to the Luke Skywalker, or is it the other way
I
around?
don't even know if they'd be considered like a duo.
But they always are together.
Yeah, I don't know. Either one's awesome, so I'm cool either way.
Nate, which one do you want to be?
Yeah, Nate, you can pick. I'm down either way.
You can be the Samwise to his Frodo.
That's pretty cool. They're both pretty awesome too.
I'm just saying, if you get to be Han Solo and Samwise, you get the better end of this deal. So I don't really know if these are great analogies for Nate.
I don't know, but it's going to be awesome, and I cannot wait to move up there. There are so many people we've known through the podcast that live up there. Now we get to meet them in person and know them for real.
It was announced to the church on Sunday.
Yeah.
And literally our phones have been blowing up ever since from people who have found out in church, just reaching out to us.
It's been
welcoming
incredibly
us.
encouraging. I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to react to some of it because it's the amount of love from all those people has been overwhelming. It's been incredible.
It's been awesome. We feel the love, guys.
Yeah, definitely. So it's just kind of just amping us up even more and more. So along those lines, kind of considering my Facebook, right? They have added me and added you.
Yep.
As friends on Facebook.
Well, more people have added you because my name is spelled really wonky, and I think people have a hard time with it.
That's possible.
When you type in Erica, you don't
just
typically
doesn't come
find
up because they don't type it that way.
Fair enough.
This is true. I didn't even think about that. But the other thing that I got randomly over this last weekend were a few friend requests from, it seemed like, Christian guys and even some pastors in like random countries in Africa and Pakistan, or a couple of these countries where there are large groups of Christians.
Right.
You just don't get friend requests from them very often.
Yeah.
And I have before, but
yeah,
there happened to happen
there are a
this
couple of
weekend.
people that we're friends with on Facebook that are from, I think, Africa, that are like legit Christians, have even commented on some like Rebel Alliance stuff, and like,
True.
Yeah, it's just kind of cool.
So,
but you're in the Army, so this, like, you're kind of trained to be leery.
100%. I am trained to be suspicious of anybody adding me on Facebook from a foreign country.
It's okay though, because Canadians are not on the like American watch list.
Yeah,
so.
they're not a part of my training of like beware. There's no Canadian that comes up in that training.
So if you're from Canada, you can still add us on Facebook. We're not leery of you.
Yeah. But something that was interesting was it started pouring in like crazy. Like I started to get tons of friend requests.
How many requests do you have on your phone right now from people from the Middle East and like Africa and whatnot?
I have 59. Today I've been adding some, looking at their profile, and if it doesn't look
legit,
if it does look legit, I'm like, okay, add whatever. Of course, if they see us share the podcast, I want them to listen, and
right.
And a lot of them seem Christian. They have Bible verses posted and stuff, and especially like Pakistan. If someone's got a Facebook and they live in Pakistan and they're sharing Bible verses, that's kind of bold, actually.
Right.
Certain countries in Africa, surprisingly, actually, like Zambia, where Vodi Bakum is at now, they're actually a Christian country.
Right.
Their constitution starts out with, we worship the one true living God.
Yeah.
Like they're more Christian than the U.S. Constitution, saying, people are all endowed by their Creator with these unalienable rights. They're more overt than that. Anyway, something that I started to see.
Sorry, I'll put that away now.
Something that I started to see common in a lot of their profiles, though, is the reality of how strong the Pentecostal movement is in
overseas.
these African countries.
Yeah.
And maybe not so much in the ones even that I saw from like Pakistan. Pakistan seems to be pretty popular, so something's going on there.
Maybe it's just like a church. Maybe like one friend found
Maybe.
found the podcast and was like
I don't know.
telling all of his Christian buddies.
I think it's smartphone access too. That's got to be something significant in some of these countries. But
or maybe it's just like one big terrorist trap that you fall and prey to.
We'll see. We'll see. And so you see that, and if you watch an old video of John Piper talking about why he hates the prosperity gospel so much.
Yeah. It was pretty popular.
Yeah, it was very popular. And some other things is you see how the prosperity gospel has been brought to Africa, and there are a lot of Christians, and I do believe true believers, but they need a more solid foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just kind of sharing this with you all to pray for them, to pray for Africa, pray that God send laborers into that, harvest. And I feel a burden for those people and just seeing the need for a good, solid
theological foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They need it so bad. And you can just see that they are hungry for it. You know what I mean?
Well, in certain countries, I would imagine, like Pakistan. I've never been there.
Yeah.
But from what I understand...
I've been close to there.
Yeah. From what I understand, most of those, like, Middle Eastern countries, just access to sound theology is one of the biggest obstacles. Not that they don't want it, not that they don't want correction or discipleship. It's just hard to get resources.
Yeah, because they would just not be allowed to ship anything in, or a website to even order stuff would be blocked by their, cell companies or their
That's why I'm like, how in the
companies.
world did they find you on Facebook?
Yeah, and that's where you could maybe see Pakistan possibly could be is a little more advanced than a lot of countries.
Yeah.
It's just true. So that's what it seemed like. And then, in Africa, I don't know. I think with Africa, having been to one country in Africa, it's just logistical beast.
Yeah.
It's just really difficult to do anything.
Yeah.
Just the northern part of Africa is the size of the United States.
Right.
And so you think about what it takes to logistically fly something across the states when we have all these resources. Imagine trying to do that when you don't have even the resources we have. So it's just difficult.
Well, and it's even hard for the average American to find good, solid theological resources. And that's why a lot of like the SBC, Lifeway type crap is just so popular, because people don't know that there are other resources.
True.
It's just hard to like figure out what is the good stuff, what is the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And the things that are the most abundant typically are not the grandest of resources. So.
Yep. So anyway, pray for Africa, guys. It's kind of on our minds and on our hearts tonight as we started
and on Grant's
to record.
Facebook, apparently.
Yeah, and all over my Facebook. Well, that's the thing. There's the post-mill blessing of the internet, right?
It's true, yeah.
Is right there on their phone. They have Facebook and stuff. They can listen to videos.
So I was thinking about this earlier, okay? And
Okay.
we can not do this, or we can do this. You can tell me what you think.
All right.
This is like live, in person. This is how Grant and I
like this. This is so...
We feed off of each
improv.
other, and Typically, I'm not this kind of person, though. Typically, we have discussed everything beforehand. So this is like back
This is true.
scenes behind the mics kind of.
This is Awakening Reformation raw.
Instead of like, how there's the after dark version of things or whatever.
Yeah.
But since our stick is get woke, it can't be like after dark. But it could be like after hours.
That's
or
right.
something.
Unplugged?
Unplugged? I don't know. No, because we're podcasts.
We're very
Everything
plugged
has
in.
to be plugged in.
You can't not plug us in.
Anyway, so you know how we do Rebel News from time to time?
Uh-huh.
And obviously the Rebel Podcast does that all the time.
Yeah.
And that's great. I love it. I love thinking through cultural topics from a Christian perspective. I think it's helpful, and we need to do that. And more often than not, we should be thinking through these things more.
Yeah, of course.
But I was also thinking earlier today, every now and then we should just do a segment where we discuss like things that look bad in our culture that actually are like God's sovereign hand working in evil for good. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you're talking about technology, and like for all the woes that we have when it comes to social media and the internet and all the terrible things that happen on the internet.
Right.
One of the grandest post-millennial things about the internet is that it does give us the ability to send good content to places overseas, and if not the ability to just like send a Bible, like you yourself can post Bible verses on your personal Facebook page that someone else that you're friends with can see and be encouraged by. Yeah. So maybe they can't have a whole Bible, but they do have access to see what you post on your social media.
Exactly.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example. And we know that God is always working that way. And we saw it as early as the first sin, in that when God cursed the serpent, he promised a Messiah.
Right.
Right? Brought good out of a bad situation. Yep. He worked good in evil. Yep. It's amazing.
So I was just thinking maybe we should every now and then just talk about, like, point out where it is that we see God doing things, where everyone seems to be freaking out and thinking like, oh, where is God?
Despair,
doom, gloom. Yeah. You know, but it's like, actually, God's doing something really cool with this. Yeah. And we just need to sit back and watch how he's going to work this for good.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay, week 1, done.
All right. Check the box. All right, so what are we going to talk about?
Tonight, we are going to talk about
some justice issues tonight, right?
That's right. Last week, we were talking about true crime with Sandra. Uh-huh. Remember that?
Yep. We can't get away from it.
No. I love true crime. I have like 4 or 5 podcasts that I listen to like every week on the reg, along with my like Christian Living podcast.
Don't you judge her.
No, it's good stuff.
I'm talking to the listeners.
I know. I'm telling you, it's good stuff.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So to sort of carry on our conversation about true crime last week, this week we wanted to pick that up and kind of talk about the justice system. There's some things that happened here in New York City.
Go figure.
Right, recently that we thought would be fun to talk about in light of the Bible. And there's some other things that we've just kind of seen happening in the world that, again, we thought would be helpful to talk about in light of the Bible. And so this is going to be kind of another sin and the justice system, sin and justice
reforms.
Yep, and that's the sort of thing we're going to talk about on this episode,
which would marry very nicely to the Rebels podcast when they were talking about God's law and applying God's law, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
perfect. So we're batting clean up, Rebels, and we hope we do well.
Well, we're not cleaning them up. We're just coming alongside like a good complementarian spouse would.
Hey, if they want to take that as an insult, I don't know.
I think you can only take it as an insult. He didn't mean it, guys. First we compliment them, then we say we have to clean up after them. Actually, it is like a spouse.
Why?
Because first we say we love them, then we clean up after them.
Well, I didn't mean it insulting. I don't know baseball terms super well, so maybe I butchered that.
Oh, I didn't even know that was a baseball term.
Batting cleanup?
Oh, I didn't hear the batting part, I guess.
It's when you come in later and then you get an RBI or you get a hit or something. I don't know.
We'll ask Joey later. It's fine.
Yeah, that's true. Joey, he'll tell me all about it.
Okay.
But I know the Rebels will know because they're big baseball fans.
So here's an interesting thing that happened in New York City.
Okay.
So there is a outcry for justice reform in New York.
There's way too many people in the prisons.
Right.
So we need to do something about
I
this.
think if you're being realistic, whether you are liberal or conservative or anywhere in between, everyone should be like, yes, we need some serious reforms.
Right.
In our criminal justice system.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody, for different reasons, but everybody would admit that our justice system is messed up.
And, yeah, for sure. So anyway, the DA of Manhattan, he recently came out with
Not of the closet.
No, which, it could happen next week. He came out in a statement, and actually I don't think he even came out. I think it was leaked. He wrote an email to his 500 assistant DAs. So he has 500 people who are working under him. That's just insane to me. But he put out this email basically stating that due to some of the latest reforms that are being
justice reform or criminal
justice reforms that are being now enforced, they are having to likely, I'm trying to think of the exact wording he used,
dismiss cases.
I think he said dismiss cases of a certain class.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming what he means by this, and don't quote me, because once again, this was not even a public statement. This was an email that was leaked. But he basically was talking about certain types of cases. I'm assuming he's going to say it's going to be cases that are like misdemeanors or like certain offenses are classified differently than like that of murder or rape or very aggressive violent crimes, right?
Yeah, and because even felonies have like 3 or 4 or 5 different classes.
Right.
And same with misdemeanors.
And there was no specification what he meant by
wasn't.
that. So this is clearly just an assumption on our behalf.
Right. But it's because of this new reform. That's the big deal.
Yes, this reform is changing everything.
Yeah.
And of course, our local news is reporting on this is like, oh my gosh, this DA.
The injustice.
He is just going to be ignoring certain cases. I think the headline, I should just read the headline because I just thought it was so funny. It says, due to overwhelming workload, Manhattan DA considering not prosecuting certain cases. So it's like shock value.
Right.
But then you stop and think about it and you're like.
He's just sitting there like, don't want to do my job.
Right, yeah. But then you stop and think about it and you're like, don't we hope that every DA does that? Don't we hope that every DA
I know, right?
considers each case and thinks, yeah, this one's not worth prosecuting?
Exactly. Like, he probably dismisses a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Or doesn't prosecute a lot of people because they were arrested for stupid reasons or whatever.
Yeah.
Or there was no evidence.
Right. Well, funny you mention evidence because this is the reform that is supposedly spiraling everyone out of control.
Okay, so what is
So
it?
what grave injustice is happening?
Yeah.
What grave injustice is now being forced upon these brave citizens of Manhattan?
Yeah, because you know what I think? I'm going to say this first because I know we already talked about this, but this is what I would think, though.
Okay.
Is I would think in Manhattan, what it is that every case that somebody who's arrested for anything related to marijuana is getting dismissed.
Right.
That's what I would think he's dismissing. Of course, they're going to clickbait it because they want traffic.
Right.
But that is not the case.
No. The new law that's being enforced is simply making it mandatory for the prosecution to hand over all evidence to the defense attorneys within 15 days of an arrest. So that means if you are suspected of a crime in Manhattan...
Arrested, right? Wouldn't this mean
yes.
You're already arrested too?
Yes, suspected of a crime and arrested. So you are behind bars waiting for a trial. Within 15 days of your arrest, the state has to give over all of their evidence, which
911 recordings,
yes.
video recordings. It listed off of several things like that.
Yes, yep.
Sorry.
Witness statements, everything.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff has to get handed over to your attorney within 15 days so that your attorney, your defense lawyer that you're hiring
Can do his job?
Yeah, to represent you in the court of law has enough time to put together your defense.
So here's the thing. The guy that was reporting, that was talking about how unreasonable this new reform is, he was saying things like, there's not even enough time to, get all this stuff together. And so a lot of these cases are going to be dismissed because the timeline is unreasonable. And I'm like, then that means no one has it.
In the world of like email.
Exactly. I was just about to say that too. Like,
yeah.
If I'm a store owner or whatever, and I just need to email a video clip of the surveillance to an attorney, it's super easy to just email it to 2 people.
Right.
Like, that's not hard. But what does this do, though? This makes the balance equal, right?
Right.
God, it's an abomination to the Lord to have an unequal balance.
Right.
So at first we were thinking we weren't going to like this thing. When we saw the
headline.
We were like, oh no, this is going to be like...
And New York is known for having stupid laws.
Right,
so...
Yeah, justice is not New York's...
strong suit?
Yeah, so we thought we weren't going to like it. But then we saw this and we were like, this makes things more fair.
Right. Like, it's surprising to me that the defense attorney doesn't have access to these types of things already.
Right? Like, how unfair is that? The prosecution gets... Well, who knows what it was before.
Right.
Because now it's just 15 days.
Well, and I have heard of cases, too, where the prosecutor will spring evidence in the middle of a trial that the defense never had a chance to even look over.
Yeah, that's terrible.
So and I am not a lawyer, so like don't hear Grant and I trying to like,
like we know best.
weed through all of these laws. But this is where you don't necessarily need to be a lawyer. You just need to know Christian principles.
Exactly.
Like Grant said, there need to be even balances. Justice is blind. So, and in America especially, you should be innocent until proven guilty in the court of law.
Right.
So you shouldn't have any disadvantage just because you are assumed guilty. Maybe you are guilty. Maybe you have done an atrocious crime and there's surveillance footage and there are witnesses and there's ample amounts of evidence. But in America, you still have a right to a fair trial.
Well, and that's a biblical principle because when somebody knew they were innocent in God's law, they were to run to a city of refuge so that they could defend themselves. Right? Before the elders of the city. And then, of course, we know the 2 or 3 witnesses requirement anyway. But this was so that they could calm down, go to the city of refuge, find this guy. Hopefully you've calmed down by the time you get to this guy. And the elders of the city get together and say, listen, this is what happened, or, whatever, and you explain it. But I still just cannot believe that we would give so much more time to prosecutors while the defense is sitting there just waiting.
Right.
Or whatever. Like that just...
And you're just hoping that you have a quick and a clever defense attorney.
Right.
And if you are given a public defender, I mean, you may not even stand a chance.
Did it say anything about the prosecution not being able to bring in extra evidence if the defense didn't have that evidence?
It didn't say that. So... Once again, I don't know what this all entails, but I am assuming that if there is additional evidence after that 15 days is up, that you would be able to introduce additional evidence. And I would imagine that you would just have to make sure that that evidence is given to the defense attorney as well. Yeah. I don't know. That's extra because every case develops. There are very few cases that are resolved after 15 days.
Yeah.
So though I know New York is very stupid, I would have a hard time believing that they're saying every case has to be solved within 15 days. For those of you who don't know maybe even how American justice works, typically what happens is if there is, let's just say, a shooting, someone is shot in a parking lot, maybe there's surveillance, maybe there are witnesses, whatever. Usually the cops and the detectives show up. The detective will, be in charge of solving the crime. He's the one that will get the surveillance and get witness statements and all that kind of stuff. And then typically when he feels that his case is sufficient to go to trial, he will hand over his caseload to the district attorney. And the district attorney, which is this guy who is making these statements about whether or not he's able to actually prosecute all these cases that are coming to his desk, the district attorney determines whether or not the cases do have enough evidence, or he'll determine if he thinks that they are sufficient to stand trial, or if once the case gets to a judge, the judge will just say, this is nonsense, get it out of my courtroom.
Right.
You don't have enough evidence, there's not enough evidence to convict, there's not enough whatever. So the district attorney kind of does have a lot of power in that he gets to say, yes, this is going to progress into the courts, or no, it's not. So that's the guy with all the power determining whether or not cases go to court that is saying these new reforms, they're too stringent. We can't possibly keep up with this workload.
Super interesting that adding on a rule that makes things more fair is such a bother on the current system. Kind of reveals the how terrible the system is, right?
Right. And of course people are upset because it does mean that certain people are going to, like certain criminals, certain offenders will go free. But we would say biblical justice demands that if there isn't enough evidence, even if they are a criminal, we have to let them go free.
Yeah, if there's not 2 or 3 witnesses, doesn't matter what they're charged with.
Right.
They shouldn't be held in prison anyway.
Right.
Or jail at this point, but...
Right. And so I think that is half of the concern behind these new reforms is that we do have people sitting in jails for months, sometimes years, in fact, that we have no evidence and we shouldn't be able to hold.
And then they aren't convicted, and then they sue the city and get a ton of money for lost time.
Yeah, sometimes not. actually, which is both sides seem totally unjust there, right?
Yeah, both sides are completely unjust.
Right.
Taxpayers were paying for them to sit in a jail or a prison that whole time.
Right.
And then it would be taxpayers that pay them this money anyway.
Right. And this is just the problem is that, once again, according to God's law, what you steal from someone, you must repay.
Yeah.
So to some extent, I actually think that's a good law. If you are holding someone and there's no justifiable reason for you to hold them, you're stealing from them because
True.
They're not able to work and provide for their family. So now you need to make sure that the money you took from them or prevented them from making, you're now reimbursing to them. So I actually do think that that's a fair
But it should come out of the pockets
thing.
of whoever it was that put them there.
Right, but
I didn't put them there.
Right. So this is where it's like, okay, well, you elected that official to make those kind of judgment calls then. So should it come out of your pocket?
Taxation is theft. Well,
the whole system is wonky anyway.
We don't believe in a kennel penitentiary system anyway.
Exactly.
So that whole thing needs to be trashed.
Right.
And overhauled. I could go on and on about the prison system, but
it's real bad. And then this is where it's like there's so many layers, right? So if you don't just scale back and say, okay, how did God design for justice to work? And you just try and make little tweaks here, like you're literally just painting a pig. You can try and paint it and you can try and fix it up all you want, but at the end of the day, it's just a pig. So as much as I do think some of these reforms are a step in the right direction, I still think the entire system is broken, and we can fix one facet of it, but it's still broken.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
We do need massive reform in our justice system, one step at a time.
Yeah, there's a lot of people whose cases need to be dismissed. This probably isn't the best way to begin.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm glad it's more fair, but there's just tons of people in prison right now that just need to be
well, and this is the problem. When you don't follow God's laws, you're ruled by man's laws, and man's laws are real shady, and you become enslaved to tons and tons of micromanaging, nuanced, weird, stupid laws, and it's
the mercy of the wicked is cruel.
It's impossible, and that's kind of where I'm like standing with this district attorney, and I'm like, yeah, man, it is impossible. He's saying this is impossible. We can't possibly do our job if we're going to be obeying these laws. And I'm like, you're right. Like, you can't do your job if you're following man's laws. It's actually impossible.
Yeah.
So maybe instead of trying to abide by man's law, you should just scratch the whole thing and go back to God's law.
Yeah. It reminds me of that G.K. Chesterton quote, that if man won't be ruled by 10 commandments, he'll be ruled by 10,000 commandments.
Right. I mean, even 10,000 would be merciful in New York City.
No kidding. But if we don't turn to God's law and the simplicity and the wisdom that he's laid down in it, then we turn to this nonsense where we just keep adding and more, and we think we're smart.
Right.
We think we're smart. We think, this prison system that we've come up with is good thing, but really what we do is enslave people for the rest of their life. Oh, we're not going to do capital punishment. Just you're in prison for life. You're going to remove their dignity as a person and cage them for the remainder of their life. You're literally enslaving them.
Right.
It's just ludicrous, but we're merciful. I don't want to put them to death. The mercy of the wicked is cruel.
Well, and it's funny, too, because it's such a example of what happens when we forsake God's ways and we embrace man's laws.
Yep.
We end up becoming enslaved to them ourselves. So we think, oh, we're doing this great thing by trying to reform prisoners. Look how humane we are. Like, we're not going to impose the death penalty. That's so barbaric. So what we're going to do is we're going to tax the people, and we're going to make the people pay for the rest of their life and their taxes to keep criminals alive. Who's the victim now? Now we're saying this person who created a crime, let's just say biblically, there are only certain crimes that would mandate the death penalty, murder being one of them.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep these murderers alive, and maybe we're not going to put him to death because that's barbaric, but now we're going to allow him to further victimize the rest of the American population by taking money from them out of their pockets that should go towards their child's education or, food on their table, and we are going to give it to the criminal to keep him alive.
Yeah, we're so enlightened.
And I'm just like, you're literally just helping him create more victims. This is, you become enslaved to the
them.
murderer yourself now. This is just
Right.
insane.
Claiming to be wise, we became fools.
Right.
Just so that I could point to the exact Bible verse for anybody wondering, Proverbs 11:1 is what says, "A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight."
Right.
So that's kind of what was in our minds thinking about this.
Do you
new
think
law.
that perhaps some of this has come from just an American instant culture where we want everything now, we want everything fast, we want everything to be done as quickly and painlessly as possible without any added frills? Just get it done. Like, persevere, knock it out, instead of actually taking the time and making sure it's done right.
Yeah, 100%.
And this is like American, but I think it's just true of our generation as well. Like, you can say of previous generations, even the craftsmanship that they would use in building homes or
True.
Whatever, like the way that they would prepare their homes and the way that they trained their children. Everything was done not based on how efficient or based
Right.
on how easy the task was, but just making sure and ensuring that it was done correctly and that they were not erring anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because everything today is looked at for its utility.
Well, and
How can I
everything
use
is
that?
instantaneous.
Right.
Literally. Like, it used to be back in the day that women spent their entire day preparing their dinner for their family. Nowadays, you're lucky if you get a woman who will go through the KFC drive-thru, pick up something on the way home for her family.
Yeah.
Kids can eat in the back seat. Maybe they'll bring it home and eat it around the dinner table. Maybe. But that's impressive. That and, like, social media, like,
Yeah.
everything, like, click on it. You can watch a video instantly. You know, you can stream all kinds of TV shows instantly. Like, everything is just instantaneous, instant gratification. And so the fact that we actually have to put a pause on all this instant justice, quote unquote, and make sure the matter is heard correctly and make sure that there is ample evidence.
Yeah.
And that we're not just like holding people illegally and unbiblically.
Right.
That even Christians are bothered by that because they don't have biblical principles and they just don't even have like that cultural Christianity anymore.
Right. Exactly.
Where we would still see like a logical outpouring of that type of behavior. Like, this is still a good thing, even if generations past didn't necessarily understand God's law or follow God's law. There was still enough trickle-down effect from our founding fathers and that American type of Christianity that they still saw it as beneficial.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And what we've lost, and it seems rapidly since the turn of the millennium, is the sense of transcendence.
Yeah.
And so if everything is materialistic and everything is right now, everything is just my life, right? There's no afterlife. Everything is right now. Then I need it to just be right now, what makes me happy right now. And so if the criminal is dealt with, well, I don't care if it was dealt with right or wrong. I just need him not in my life. And so if you're telling me that they're just letting them off and he's coming back to my block, well, that bothers my right now. That bothers my happiness right now.
Or to even know whether or not he is a criminal. If social media or Channel 12 says this person is a criminal, like, he's not actually been convicted of anything yet. You're just assuming he's guilty because he's in jail awaiting his trial. Our whole attitude towards the individual sitting behind the bars of the jail cell is that because he's behind those bars, he must be guilty, right? Because the police never make mistakes. So then we're sitting here saying we need biblical reform. We're sitting here saying we need to just follow God's law. We're sitting here saying that we sympathize with this DA.
Yeah.
And we see where his job is impossible if he's actually going to do his job effectively because he's following man's laws, not God's. But yet, we do still see that the desire to reform what's happening is a good desire.
Right.
And then, so we have on one hand, yes, reform the prisons. And then on the other hand, we have the DA saying, but if you reform the prisons, I can't do my job. So where do we...
It's got to give somewhere.
Yeah, where do we give here? What does the Christian say the solution should be?
I mean, you'd have to know a lot more about all the regulations and laws in a city like Manhattan. But usually it's get rid of them. Get rid of regulations. Get rid of stipulations and policies and stuff like that. Usually that's where you start.
Biblically?
Right, because the Bible just doesn't have that. God's law just didn't have layers and layers and layers and layers of regulation and
Well, and
regulation.
bylaws.
Yeah.
That's the problem with most of New York City is that there's just tons of bylaws. Like every law has like 15 underwriting laws.
Yeah, God's law was not set up in a way for a real tight bureaucracy.
Well, and the funny thing is that this fear that people have when they see clickbaity articles like this is that criminals are going to be released from prison.
Uh-huh.
See, this is such a terrible thing. Criminals are going to be let out of prison.
Right.
Cotton Mather said it would be better for 10 guilty witches to go free than for one innocent person to die.
That's good.
And so I think, though we're not talking about witches, the principle still stands that as a Christian, we should rejoice seeing innocent people released because that is a portrait of the gospel, right? Like, that we, having been made righteous through Christ's sacrifice, have been set free.
Right.
And we are no longer condemned.
Right. We no longer have a guilty verdict.
Right. So that's why organizations like the Innocence Project and things like that are great organizations and are a great way for Christians to rejoice in the truth and say, okay, well, this person is actually innocent. We shouldn't be holding him there in fear of what could happen if he's let off. Well, if he's innocent, then rejoice in that.
Yeah, who cares?
I mean, it's always kind of puzzled me anyway that we would rather just have someone sitting in jail for a crime rather than actually finding out who the true perp was.
Yeah.
Like, if that person's innocent, then the guilty person is still walking around. Don't we want to find out who that person is? Yeah. Because he's out by us.
Right.
Like, the innocent person's behind the bars and the guilty person's still walking around us. So that's not great for us.
Right. Well, and just you want to talk about injustice.
Right.
We've heard that kind of story far too often.
Right. But anyway, going back to that, like the innocent, guilty thing, Christians just need to trust God too and be like, the truth will come out.
Right.
Especially for using God's law because he's just designed it to work that way. Turns out if we use, God's methods that, he sovereignly works through them.
Yeah, right.
It's just funny how that works.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could be done with this conversation now because we could go on forever.
Yeah, we could go on and on and on. It's sort of heavy too.
Yeah, and it's so nuanced and it's hard when you're not talking about a specific crime.
Yeah,
right?
It's hard when you're not a lawyer.
Yeah, when you don't really know stuff.
Right. No, but the biblical principles apply across the board. They are objective.
Right.
And like we said, the law is supposed to be blind. It's supposed to be impartial. Right? Those are overarching principles that should be applied.
Right.
No matter what day and age you're in, no matter what culture, no matter if you're rich or poor, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So that's where we're at.
And Christian lawyers ought to be doing their part in ensuring that the innocent do go free and that the guilty are put behind bars. And not doing it in a shady way, but doing it in like a biblical way.
Right.
Not forcing the issue or forcing
taking bribes.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And reform the system from within.
Right. Which, when we say reform, we don't mean just like...
We don't mean nailing theses to a door.
Well, that too. But I was going to say, we don't mean simply just, putting like a 15-day limit on...
Right.
Yeah, I think that is good to a certain extent because it does force people to be more just. But once again, when you throw another man-made regulation onto the problem, it's like, that's going to breed 50 more laws out of just that one little...
Right.
New reform. So it's such a tricky thing.
It's just funny how that little thing exposed the rottenness, know?
Right.
So, okay, well, we can be done.
Okay.
We hope this was helpful for you guys to think about these things biblically. We hope that you do the same in your state, in your city, and the things that are being passed. And
don't just believe like articles you see on Facebook, y'all.
Certainly not the headline.
Dude, click on it. Think through it. Like, think what the Bible would have to say concerning the topic.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thanks again for listening, guys. We pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened by the power of the Spirit. And until next time, get woke.
Yeah. Let's start with the microphone check. 1, 2 first. Water to the dry and weary soul of the true church. The kind of things that few search. They say that the truth hurts. Well, this pain is gain, so let's explain the new birth. First things first, can't neglect this at the start. I must preface my remarks with the deadness of the heart from original sin, the effects of the fall. The sin of our first parents brought death to us all. Since Adam was our federal head, what he did counted for us. In him we're all rebels and dead. Yo, captured in the mind, disaster, sin and crimes in a dark state. Alaska in the wintertime, sour in our frames. Left to ourselves, we be devoured in the flames, cause we're powerless to change. If you feel that way, I pray that you respond happily as you see what Jesus had to say in John chapter 3.